And
Carry on.
so I got that attorney to violate the misprision of felony code. They said, well, we're not going to do anything about this. We don't have any duty to act. This, and I said, well, yes, you do. Read the statute. Okay, so from that point, I went to the attorney general, and I kind of skipped a couple of the levels of authority having jurisdiction. And the reason I did is because that attorney is a member of the Bar Association, as is the attorney general. Okay, and the reason I did that is to show that if the attorney general, if he fails to perform a duty, now I have two examples of members of the same private organization committing the same offense against the same target victim.
Which is called collusion.
That's collusion, exactly. So
Gentlemen, we are
the
now.
attorney general.
Hold on one second, gentlemen. So you know we are now live and streaming over on Facebook and Twitter. Go carry on.
Okay. So the attorney general did exactly what I predicted he would do. Okay. Now, the thing about criminal minds that makes them vulnerable is that they are predictable. And I predicted that the sheriff, that the lieutenant, that the attorney general would take the bait. And the attorney general violated my rights as a victim of crime and referred me back into the care of local law enforcement, which is the agency that committed the offenses against me. So now I have cause and standing to not only move civilly against the attorney general, but also criminally against the attorney general. So what do you do when the attorney general, when he is obstructing justice?
Beautiful. I'm glad you asked that question, and here's how you're going to address that.
Well, I know. Let me give you the answer.
Man, Derek Shaton Gonzalez was caused
hold
harm
on,
by
hey,
way of.
hold on.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
No, let him answer you. Let him answer you real quick.
No.
It's only going to take him a second.
Question to the id.
Let him answer. Let him answer, please, and then carry on.
Well, I'm just look. It was a hypothetical question that I'm posting to the id.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
carry on.
So the question that people will want to know is the answer they want to know is what do you do when the attorney general doesn't do his job? Who is the authority having jurisdiction over the attorney general? It is the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So I proceeded to go to the FBI and filed a criminal report against a quote unquote criminal agency whose agents were obstructing justice. And I described all the particulars of the events. And at the very end of the conversation, the agent on the end of the line says, well, who are these people? What's their names? And what's the name of the organization? I said, it is the Attorney General of California and the Republican and Democratic parties of California. And she says, we can't get involved. And she hung up. Okay. So now I have an FBI agent who has been willfully blind to the report. Now, I have not done the FOIA request yet to get the transcript of the call. So what do you do when the FBI agent says, we're not going to do anything? Well, you call the special agent in charge of his field office. They're called the SAC, S-A-C. Yep. And you say, Mr. Special Agent in charge, I want you to take that agent's badge and gun from them and remove them from office. Okay? And notify a prosecutor that they have performed as an accessory after the fact in conspiracy to obstruct justice. And that's exactly what we're charging every single one of these people with. Okay? So what do you do if the special agent in charge, if he doesn't do his job or she? You go to the U.S. attorney. The U.S. attorney is the one that has the power to arrest your FBI agents. Okay? Now, what do you do if the U.S. attorney fails to perform their duties? Well, now we get into conflicts of interest and who has jurisdiction. And this is where the fourth branch of government comes into play, the grand jury. Okay. Agents for the Democratic parties, the Republican parties, the bar associations acted in concert to abrogate the citizen's right to privately prosecute criminal matters in the courts at all levels of jurisdiction. This is an ancient right and power that goes all the way back to the earliest days of the English legal system. Okay. And the Supreme Court, I shouldn't say the Supreme Court, agents for the Bar Association who act as judges have subverted and abrogated that right. They've destroyed that right by making law from the bench in cases where they have said specifically, we can see no cognizable interest of the private citizen to enforce the law. When there exists a mountain of precedent that shows that not only does the citizen have the right to privately prosecute because they may have suffered damages or harm, or they might be acting to protect a party that's incapable of protecting themselves, but there is actually precedent out there that says that the private citizen has the right to seek criminal sentencing, that's jail, merely for the pleasure of vengeance, because all suits at law are a civil war, and our courts are the alternative to violence. And these are all peace officers. All of your court officers are peace officers or conservators of the peace. It is not their job is not to derail controversy and conflict. Their job is to maintain the peace.
Hey,
and
so
where the citizen
can
has go ahead.
Go ahead, Derek. Smash it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Watch this.
So
smash it, man.
I agree with that's how it's supposed to be. All right. But we have to comprehend that it is no longer a de jure form of government. What you're speaking of is actually how the de jure government would function if it was in existence at the moment in time. Now, you can invoke it. Don't get me wrong. These people wear multiple hats, but it's a matter of the way you move that dictates how they move. Okay. For example, you can have a ministerial administrator on the public at law side, and that same ministerial administrator can switch a hat and then become a chancellor in an Article 3, subsection 2, subpart 1, exclusive jurisdiction of equity court.
Or a magistrate.
Right.
Or a magistrate.
So
or a magistrate.
Let me show you this. When we're using statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, regulations, and somehow, yes, and somehow people compute that it applies to them. Let me just read you something real quick. And James, Mr. Ehrlich, who was a famous defense attorney, once won an entire case using nothing but the Bible. He wrapped it in a soft cover, and he used the Bible on a jury of 12, and that's the only thing he used, and he won the entire case. And I just want to read something to you, and I want to explain to you what statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations really are, and whom they actually apply to. So it says, knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man, but for the lawless, and the disobedient, for the ungodly, the heathens, right? And for the sinners, for unholy and profane, for murderers of fathers and murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, because mankind is a kind of man. It's not man, right? And for mercantiles, men stealers, for liars, for perjurers, perjured persons, right? And if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine, all right? Everything I do is based on doctrine and sound principles, okay? And what it's telling you in 1 Timothy is the law was not written for a righteous man. Okay, now hold on, it gets better. So what law are they speaking of in 1 Timothy section 9? They're talking about the law of the Pharisees. The law of man only applies to the ungodly, the heathen, Now, the word legal, the very definition of the word legal, actually means the undoing of God's law. So when they ask me, Derek, are you practicing law? I would never practice law. First of all, law has been perfected since the beginning of time. All I'm merely doing is enforcing the law. There's a clear-cut difference. I didn't write the law. I just abide by it. I am a lawful man, not a person. I'm not a thing. I'm a man. So let me go on to show you something else. We get into Timothy and it says, thou therefore, 2 Timothy, thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace, again, grace being an equitable word, which is what ministerial administrators are supposed to be doing. They're supposed to be administering the grace of our Heavenly Father. So help me God. Okay, their first oath is actually to God. And people go through the semantics of saying, oh, well, what God, the bala, Satan, yada, yada, yada. You move the court. And you have to understand that the highest court on the land is not the Supreme Court. It's you, ladies and gentlemen. It's yourself. The four corners of the paper is your court, and you can hold court 24/7. Okay. And I've proven this. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many, witness, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also. All right. When we're looking at man's law, man is envious of God and has always tried to play God. And we see that with GMOs. We see that with the statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations. I talk to many foreigners who are in other countries that go, I came to America thinking it would be great, only to find a bunch of dictators wearing badges. Everybody out there wearing a badge or cloaked with some veil of superiority in an alleged society really is a mini dictator who seeks to enforce their will upon you. Now it's a question of whether or not you know how to identify the trespass, because there really is only one law in the entire nation, of which the nation is completely devoid of all law. The United States, for all intents and purposes, is lawless. And let me explain to you why it's lawless. Because contract creates the law and equity follows the law. And because we know this to be self-evident and true, all men are responsible for knowing the law because they're all responsible for knowing the contracts they enter into.
Yes.
Now, the Constitution does not coffer you any rights. I used to be one of those wingnuts running around the court going, the Constitution, I have a constitutional right. But I was wrong. I have an unalienable right that is affirmed and cemented by the Constitution, which is sound doctrine and principle and rules for the alleged government to never trifle with or cross the line. So when you're speaking about the 14th Amendment, I see what you're doing, but at the same time, understand that that 14th Amendment was never ratified by a de jure government, which means it doesn't apply. It's nothing more than public policy that they're using through their corporate charter. So I'm just distinguishing. I'm not saying that anything you're saying is wrong. I'm just simply stating that there are two different jurisdictions.
We don't have to mention the 14th Amendment in order to use it.
Right. Okay? I agree.
Okay. So, and that really is the foundation of the audit of the tarball. That is that all parties in a matter have a right to due process. Period. End of story. It's indisputable. You know, that's just what it is.
Adjoining all of this effort,
and
is
that
what's
is
important. Is adjoining all of the people that it's happening to. That's what should be important here, especially the homeless, because the numbers are rising, gentlemen.
Right.
And I don't have any more noble cause than to put the brakes on what we have going on. And even the house thing, man. What are they going to do if all of a sudden tens of thousands of people start moving into houses? They don't have enough. I don't think they have enough.
That's exactly why they're not executing the 24 million foreclosures right now. This COVID thing is a way of releasing a pandemic bond. I just witnessed
that BlackRock just scored. They just scored trillions. People have no idea.
I just watched a documentary 2 days ago of a woman who works for the government who was stating how they attribute or count COVID deaths. And she said, here are the facts. If you die of a heart attack, yet you have tested positive for COVID in the past, we register it as a COVID-related death. Now, anybody trying to keep accurate numbers, any scientist trying to keep accurate information upon their experiment, because remember, everything's a theory until it's unproven, right? Or proven not to be so anymore. Gravity is nothing more than a theory. Time is nothing more
you
than
know
a
what?
theory.
Can I interject something right there?
Uh-huh.
Plausible deniability is one of the tactics that the Bar Association, the Democrats and the Republicans have used to their advantage from the beginning. Plausible deniability. And when we start getting into cases where plausible deniability is a major factor, I mean, we're looking at a really big can of worms to
Can we agree that a case is nothing more than an opinion?
Yes, we can agree.
Okay.
We can agree.
So if let's use Trezevant versus the city of Tampa Bay for an example, because a lot of people like to use that. All right. And I'm going to explain something to you, your listeners, everybody out there. And just keep in mind, I'm just a man. I'm nothing special. I don't know anything more than anybody else, but there are some sound doctrines and principles for what I'm about to speak that aren't written in any books. Okay. And here it comes. Trezevant versus the city of Tampa Bay, Florida was a case that was handled in 1984 where an officer pulled over a man against his will, held him on the side of the road for 23 minutes, and he reaped the reward of it was something like $25,000 or something like that. So it boiled down to being like $1,400 a minute, right? And I'm paraphrasing at this point. Those are not the particulars in the details.
More precisely, about $1,080 a minute or some crap like that. It was a pretty big
There you
amount.
go. Right. Okay. So here's the principles and the doctrines that I'm going to go off of here. And these are just in my own head. You're not going to find this in a book. Why today in the 21st century, when I know that the FRN note, the Federal Reserve note, has depreciated by 97% of its buying power, would I agree to use Trezevant versus the city of Tampa Bay when I know that dissimilar things should not be joined? Doesn't mean they can't be, but I am the deciding factor of whether or not I will consent to that being applicable or not, period. Secondly, when evaluating the depreciation of the Federal Reserve dollar, are you meaning to tell me that my rights also have diminished? My unalienable rights have diminished in value? I don't think so. And how do we get this? How do we find this to be applicable? Well, we look at the gold standard and we look at the price of gold in 1984 and how much Trezevant would have been able to buy in 1984 with his award, with his winnings, right? From the unlawful arrest and seizure of his property and person, correct? And we look at that. And we realize very, very quickly that if we are still using Trezevant versus the city of Tampa Bay, Florida, we agree and consent that our rights, our unalienable rights, are considerably worth less than what they were in 1984. It's asinine. But what you can do is utilize the information within the case to come to a sound, firm understanding that being accosted against your will, absent a victim, is actually a criminal offense that is orchestrated against you based upon the fact that a public policy enforcer believes that you're engaged in commerce while falsifying a record on the side of the road, absent the fact that you're not engaged in commerce, hauling persons or things or goods for services and a payment, right? So right there on the side of the road, you have an agent and agency who's egregiously declared an emergency when no emergency is present. He's created danger on the side of the road. He's accosted you against your will. They will tell you that being pulled over on the side of the road does not constitute as an arrest. But if you are incapable of moving an inch because they tell you you can't, the red lights are on, you're not to move. That is an arrest, ladies and gentlemen. It is a violation of your unalienable rights to travel, to migrate, to move, the right of locomotion in modern day conveyances to go from point A to point B, absent a victim. That is restriction of your movement, not liberty. Liberty is permission on a ship, which is what they're operating under, which is their public policy, corporate charter that they presume and assume that you belong to as a volunteer for your lack of knowledge. And the good book tells us that my people shall suffer for their lack of knowledge. And I will always lean back on this Bible, the King James 1611 version. And the reason for it is it's the book of all the laws. It's the original book on banking, and it is the original book on trust. And if you pick up that holy book and you just start reading it and open up your heart, you can see that what gun-toting morons are doing on the side of the road has nothing to do with protecting your unalienable rights, which is their oath of office. That's their duty, is to protect your unalienable rights. But how do you protect a right? How do you protect something that you know nothing of? I've asked countless officers, you took an oath of office, correct? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I said, and you took an oath to defend the Constitution, correct? And the Constitution pertains to the unalienable rights of the people that shall not be abridged, the enumerated and the unenumerated. Well, absolutely. I said, can you tell me anything else about the Constitution? No. Well, how do you defend something that you've never read? How do you pledge an oath, which is for life? For life, how do you pledge an oath to something that you've never read? And furthermore, how do you defend it if you don't comprehend the contract that you entered into? Remember, all men are responsible for knowing the contracts they enter into. Thus, ignorance of the law excuses no man, period, because contract creates the law and equity follows the law. You guys follow me?
Because that's what you have as administrative agents, these agents for the agency.
So everything is a trespass.
Engaging you, period. Yeah, trespassing you the moment they engage you.
Trespassing is past tense. It's always a trespass. It's present. Everything is present. And here's why. In equity, when we look at a trespass in equity, the trespass continues day after day until remedy is had. Do you know how powerful what I just said is?
We are flowing
a trespass versus a title or statute code violation. A trespass is something that continues to happen day after day until remedy is had. That means if you trespassed against me yesterday and haven't offered me compensation for your dereliction of duty, your breach of public policy, your breach of the public oath, everything that correlates to that continues to transpire day after day until remedy is had, which means the accumulating compensation continues because the remedy hasn't been had, which means the assault is still currently going. Whether or not they're still in contact with you is irrelevant. A trespass has been had. And until it's remedied, that trespass continues, causing a man harm. Furthermore, if I don't stand up against these sinister actors who are trespass against I as a man, then I'm allowing my fellow brothers and sisters to be trespassed against as well, because I haven't set the precedent that we will not stand for this or put up with it.
Which he has established a standing as a man, and now he is the witness and has, I think, what a lot of people like to call status to bring this thing, because you got the DMV thing going on in the state of Nebraska.
Yes, state. And it's going to be an absolute blast. I'm looking forward. And the reason that I don't go on the offensive, here's why. If I go on the offensive, I have to prove my claim. But if they haven't given me any documentation yet, I don't have any evidence. See, I like to use their own evidence against them. So you're going to bring a claim against me? You're going to threaten me by way of phone, by way of wire, by way of computer? That's a Title 18 violation. But I'm not going to call it a Title 18 violation. I'm going to call it a trespass by way of coercion, by way of intimidation, by way of threatening, menacing phone calls, by malice and ill will and intent, and I can prove all that by having the phone calls recorded, by having the mail matter in my hand, but I can't prove any of that prior to them making a move. It's a game of chess. Let them make the move because it's fatal. And here's why. Check this out. If I share my screen, Ken, are your viewing audience going to be able to see it or not?
I'm not. Yeah.
All right. Let me just read it.
Share screen. I can put whatever you want to put up. And
the price is wrong.
We're flowing in
check it out.
Multiple groups right now.
The price is right. The price is wrong. Reimbursement of expenses for acquitted criminal defendants. All right. Now, defendants, first of all, is a fiction. Okay. You can't be a defendant. You're either a man or you're a fiction. Right. And they say that man can't operate in the fictional world. Well, that's not true either. Okay. Two courts can run simultaneously at the same time. You can hold your own court of record. Because their record is actually private and they presume and assume that and believe it to be public when it's not. Okay. So anyway, it says not guilty. These two simple words elicit intense relief from any defendant at the conclusion of a criminal trial. As one harrowing ordeal ends, however, a new one inevitably takes shape. And what they're talking about here is if you allege that I, a man, have caused somebody harm, injury, damage, or loss and can't prove your claim, then I have a right to remedy, and remedy are rights and rights are remedy. And that remedy can be in the form of compensation. Now, who says what compensation is? I get to dictate that. Ladies and gentlemen, they are abrogated the gold clause, but there are statutes that have been put back in place by Congress that are held in the Library of Congress that state that they still have an obligation to pay you in gold or silver if that is what you want. Okay.
Right.
So I could ask for eggs, chickens, goats, milk, land. It doesn't really matter. Actually, I can't ask for land because they don't control land. They don't control land at all. In fact, if you look at your warranty deeds, you don't own shit. You're a tenant, and you can accept and acknowledge from the grantor being the grantee. You can accept and acknowledge the colorable title, if you will, but it still doesn't grant you the land. That's real estate and property, which isn't land at all. So I'm getting off topic here, but what I'm talking about is your right to compensation can be whatever you dictate. If you want their assets, say, I always tell them I want their asses and their badges, and they go, oh, you can't cuss in here. I go, oh, you misunderstood what I meant by asses. I like to play the word trivia game with them too, because that's exactly what they're using against us. And you can't use the word ass in here. And I go, oh, I meant assets. I'm sorry, I was abbreviating that. Assets and badges is what I'm here today for. That's what I'm looking for. I don't need any other compensation. I want to hang one of their badges on my wall and smile every morning knowing that I got a tyrant off the street, preventing my brothers and sisters from being accosted against their will and harmed by some ignorant fool taking his income under false pretenses, breach of public policy, breach of his fiduciary duty, breach of oath, breach of the public trust. Trust law is the highest law on the land, ladies and gentlemen. You want to get back to land, you want to get back to self-governance, then you need to get back into trust law. And that, my friends, is where the holy book comes into play, the King James 1611 Bible. If you know how to read this book, it will change your life to such a magnitude that you are literally untouchable short of murder. So
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
If we are going forward in the courts with a criminal accusation against the bar associations,
yeah, you're in their courts. Why are you sleeping with the enemy trying to get relief from the enemy? That's absolutely asinine. Identify the man that's trespassed against you, and you can attach this title to him if you like. So John Doe Smith, who sometimes acts as
let me answer your question, because in their courts, they are subject to their statutes. Okay. If they do not perform to those statutes, then they can be held accountable. Am I correct?
Sure, if the judge sees it your way. But then again, let me repeat this. There are times statutes apply. And then again, Derek, there are times that the statutes don't apply. And I go, how am I to be able to identify when they apply and when they don't apply? Derek, I will tell you when they apply. All right, then. This doesn't seem like a sham at all. Judge, where are we located again? The state. And who's bringing the claim? The state of Nebraska. So I got another question. We're in the plaintiff. Are we near the rectum or the scrotum? Because it's really starting to smell funny in here. Huh? You know, you just got to nail them because these guys are witty. They're not stupid. I used to think judges are stupid. Ministerial administrators were stupid. No. They're running a separate game on a separate game board. That's why the court is everything is had in a court, because it's a game and you're just bouncing the ball. And if you really want to be good at bouncing the ball, you have to be able to identify when they're trying to put the onus of probandi on you. And you have to be smart enough and intelligent. Well, let's leave out the word smart. Smart means painful, right? So you have to, well, maybe it applies here. You have to be smart enough to toss that onus of probandi, that ball, back in their court with who, what, where, when, why, how, right? And when you're asking those questions, so when did the state get hurt? What were their injuries? Where do they live? Do they have an EIN? Where's their DUNS number? Have they filled out a W-4 or W-2 in the last 6 years? Where's their place of employment? Where's their phone number? Where does Mr. and Mrs. Smith live? Has anybody had contact with them? You know, and they want to go, well, you sound insane. We ought to take you to the mental insane asylum. Well, if you sit there silent by tacit acquiescence, you agree to go to the insane asylum. Everybody volunteers to go to jail. I used to think it was a crazy statement, but it's true. It's absolutely factual. So
they say the prisoner holds the keys to his own cell.
I absolutely had a chancellor tell me that. He ordered me to jail, and he looked at the sheriff and he says, Sheriff, but he will have the keys to his cell. And so we get out the door and the sheriff goes, I said, well, so what are you going to do? He goes, well, I'm going to take you to jail. I said, you going to give me the keys? He goes, no, I'm not going to give you the keys. I said, you heard him with his own lips. He said, give him the keys to the cell. So I want the keys to the cell. He goes, I'm not going to give you the keys to the cell. I said, we better go back and talk to the judge then, because it was very clear. He told you to give me the key to the cell. Long story short, some friends came in and rescued me out of that situation with FRN notes, but it was imperative that they didn't come from me, right? But if I wanted to stress that, I could have had the sheriff drag me back into the court and have him clarify what he said. because according to my ears and the sheriff's ears, well, yeah, he said give you the keys, but that's insanity, Derek. I'm not going to give you the keys to the cell.
Right. But the reason that I asked you about going into their courts with an accusation against the Bar Association, that means that all members of the bar have a conflict of interest with you as a party, and therefore you have the right to choose your own counsel who is not an attorney for the bar.
Absolutely. I agree with that
Okay.
100%. And I've actually stepped into a court, and the judge called the name. They called for this Schaefer character, right? This person. And I stood up immediately and I walked up to the bar and I said, I am the trustee here to handle the affair. There are no facts in dispute. We waive all benefits without God. And I just need to know the debt due and owing, and to be assured that I will be availed, subrogated, right? My right of subrogation is standing in for the principal as trustee. That judge turned about 3 shades of white, looked at the prosecutor. They were just staring at each other. I said, if it would please the court, I'd be more than happy to speak to that gentleman. And when I said that gentleman, I was looking at the prosecutor, and she acknowledged the fact that I was looking at the prosecutor out in the hall. If it could expedite this matter and possibly provide remedy outside this court, allowing this court to continue with its daily fleecing. And he stood up and said, I'd like to talk to that man out in the hallway. And we get out there and he says, Derek, I wish you'd quit this shit. We're going to arrest you one of these days. And I'm just like, no, you're not. You got to actually find me guilty of some type of actual criminal activity. And all I'm in here doing is saving my fellow brothers and sisters, understanding that it's banking. And all I'm here to do is be availed as surety and exercise my right to subrogation. I'm just here to settle the debt, because under CFR 277211, all crimes are commercial. And because all crimes are commercial in this nature, everything is civil. So you're either going to have to bring forward the international contract that we entered into and expose what you've actually done, which they're never going to let that cat out of the bag, or you've got to discharge and offset these allegations. It's that simple.
If we put you on the offense, you will be a battering ram.
Well,
you will be a battering ram.
Boom, boom.
Hey,
listen. Keep talking, gentlemen. I'm going to go AFK for a moment, so just keep it going because we're flowing in several groups. So,
all right.
Good stuff.
So, Derek, let me ask you a question. Because for my own case, for the gentleman in Virginia, for Ken's case, and for the class, the class of citizens,
citizens are all subjects, bud. Also, if you're a citizen, you're a subject. I don't care.
I'm talking about the class of people or persons or whatever you want to call them.
Sure.
Well, people who are the victims of these
that's the fiction. And if you want to attach yourself to the fiction, we pay for the sins of our fathers, right?
God damn it.
Grant the name to the court and be done with it. It's not yours. Let them play with it. Watch how they respond. When you say, I grant the name to the court, show a cause why this action shouldn't be handled sealed and ex parte, for the beneficiary is known. I'm the beneficiary of this SDK trust, this constructive trust, this resulting trust from this guy fabricating a story here in this open court forum, which is really private, not public. See, the 12 presumptions of the law come in handy really quick here. Have you heard the 12 presumptions of the law yet?
No.
Oh man, you're in for a treat. Hold on. Let me just pull this up. This thing is so beautiful. 1 second here. Let's do it this way. On the public side, it's quintessential. It's a must. You must rebut this right here. Okay, the 12 presumptions of court, canon 3228. A Roman court does not operate according to any true rule of law, all right, sound doctrines and principles, but by presumption of the law. Remember, contract creates the law, so equity follows the law. Therefore, if presumptions presented by the private bar guild are not rebutted, they become fact and are therefore said to stand true or as truth in commerce. All right. Law of mercantile. Therefore, there are 12 key presumptions asserted by the private bar guild, which, if unchallenged, stand true, being public record, public service, public oath, immunity, summons. All right. What do we do when we summons? We summons the dead, right? With Ouija boards. What did your grandma always tell you? Don't you play with demons. So when they send a summons, I know you ain't talking to this living soul protected by God and Jesus Christ dying for his sin. I know you ain't summoning this man here, right? Because you can only summons from the dead. Custody, court of guardians, court of trustees, government as executor beneficiary. Now let's talk about executor beneficiary. When I told you guys that trust law is the highest law on the land, there is no superior law in land, on land. It is trust law. And so when the government presumes and assumes to be the executor beneficiary of the constructive and resulting trust from their fraud, okay, and I stay away from the word fraud because it's commercial, but in actuality, they've falsified a record. Okay.
Yes.
So understanding trust is so important, and reading that Bible will help you see it. I've used this Bible in court, and I've had lawyers follow me out of the courtroom and go, "That's the most powerful book in the world." And I go, "I know it is." And it's just amazing to see the twinkle in their eye. Some of these older lawyers are for people standing up. They worry about the future, but they're stuck in a conundrum where not enough people are awake to stand. So not all of them are horrid.
And that is exactly my brainstorm over. Well, it's not brainstorm. We can say that's just the voice of reason, of creation, the truth of. Imagine all these homeless people writing, "I a man" or "I a woman" being trespassed.
Hey, look, law is simple, brother. If law is this complicated, how could anybody who is expected? You show me one agent and agency that knows all 66 million statutes, codes, laws, rules, city ordinances, and provisions. You show me one man that knows that. That's not law. That's a perversion of law. It's an impossibility. When you create an impossibility out of necessity, I have to subvert from your religion and begin to self-educate, and not only that, self-govern at that point.
Derek, they think they're the homeless, the people that I do journalism with on the homeless sweeps and that's that business going on right now. Mm-hmm. And they're taking them to get IDs.
Yeah, because it's big money. They can't charge up the estate without certain credentials.
Right. So I'm trying to, you try to show them, look, you're probably hurting them more than you're helping them. Sadly, because that's how they're going to get banked on. And there's testimony.
It's incredible.
Well, there's testimony from these people I have recorded. Saying, look, they come in and they collect hundreds of people's information, and then they don't. Then they disappear. They're harvesting.
And it's sold.
Yeah, they're harvesting these legal names out on the street. But imagine,
and then it's sold.
Imagine if 300 of them wrote trespass letters.
Right.
That just got
check this out. Let's get back to the 12 presumptions of law, because this is so fundamentally important.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
This is the first document handwritten that goes into the court right away. This is the only thing I care about. Okay, the 12 presumptions: executor duties on tort, incompetence, and guilt. Definition of presumption, which is found in the Oxford Dictionary. Okay, I'm giving them the reference of where I am finding the material. Now, if they want to quantify and qualify their juxtaposition and show me how their dictionary is so much more superior to this one, then I still have to accept and consent to what dictionary they're using. So if they try to use Black's Law Dictionary, which is a book of black magic, spells, potions, if you will, okay? It's verbal weaponry in the Black's Law Dictionary, okay? Its intent is to deceive and confuse, and that's why it's black magic, it's Black's Law, okay? An idea that is taken to be true on the basis of probability. A presumption is a presumption on which must be agreed, right? Consent of the parties to be true. Then, and equally, if one party challenges the presumption to be true on the basis of probability, then this is all that is recognized to be required to remove the presumption is a formal challenge to that presumption. What are we doing by submitting the 12 presumptions of law? We are formally challenging the presumption that this matter of presumption is now decimated, right? We're now taking control of it. The presumption then has no standing or merit in material fact. A probability, which is also found in the Oxford Dictionary, is where we're referencing where we're getting our material, right? The extent to which something is probable, the likelihood of something happening or being the case. By definition, then this is not substantive, as it is only a probability. Is it probable that the state may bring an allegation against you? Yeah, it's probable. Do they really exist? Are they of flesh and blood? Do they make their own decisions, or are they a corporation? All right. So we're getting rid of the probability of what may be, and therefore no substance and material fact. If you can't pinch it and it doesn't say how, it's not real, right? And that's a poor analogy, because you can pinch a tree and it's never going to say anything, and it is very much real. A state court does not operate according to any true rule of law, but by presumption of law. Therefore, if presumption presented by the private bar guild are not rebutted, they become fact and are therefore said to stand true. There are 12 key presumptions asserted by the private bar guilds, which, if unchallenged, stand true, being public record, public service, public oath, immunity, summons, custody, court of guardians, court of trustees, government as executor beneficiary, agent and agency, incompetence, and guilt. The presumption of public record is that any matter brought before a state court is a matter for the public record, when in fact it is presumed by the members of the private bar guild that the matter is a private bar guild business matter, unless openly rebuked and rejected by stating clearly the matter is to be on the public record. The matter remains a private bar guild matter, completely under private bar guild rules. Now, justice.
But we don't consent to that.
You do consent if you don't rebuke, and it tells us in the Bible you must rebuke and lay the inequities of your fellow man at my feet, so I may rest my feet on their inequities. Okay, you have to come up out of them, because by default they're placing you in their realm as a volunteer for you. Look, I've had a judge ask me this: you got a driver's license? And I was like, yep. Good. We're going to go ahead and proceed. And I was like, what the hell just happened? Guess what I just did? I openly admitted to volunteering to be compliant with their system.
Yeah.
Now, I know how to respond to that question. Now, let me show you. Hold on. Let me show you how you properly assert yourself to that question, because I now know, and I've used it, and the judge went silent. Okay. Do you have a driver's license? Nope, the estate does. Do you have a birth certificate? Nope, the estate does. Do you have a social security card? Nope, the estate does. Well, who the hell are you? The beneficiary. Well, how do we prove that? I just said so. Any agent and agency in here going to say that I'm not? Any agent and agency going to lay claim to that estate? How about the constructive and resulting trust here? Anybody going to disclaim the trust? 63 Charlie Am jurisprudence 2D clearly outlines and states that all public officers, all public officials are trustees of the people. You don't want to be caught breaching trust law, do you? It's the most damning thing in the world to breach trust law. Ooh.
Now you got to be able to memorize that and be able to get that out. This
is why I say we need more people like Derek.
No.
All right, but hold on. Let's get through these.
People to do what he's saying. It's
you just got to
the overcomplicated idea of going through their realm has been made impossible for a reason. Okay,
because you're not supposed to. Yeah, you're not licensed by the licensor as a licensee to do those things. Look, the Constitution doesn't say you have a right to an attorney, a right to a lawyer. It says you have a right to counsel, a learned man at law, in law, right? It doesn't say you have a right to a liar, but the court system at law will tell you have a right to an attorney. Well, you don't have a right to an attorney. You have a right to a learned man as elbow counsel.
Yep.
Some elbowed counsel over here in the what's rated as the worst county in the nation by some of older researchers.
At law, I could have you sign over a power of attorney, and I can go in there not being an attorney. Well, I'm actually a qualified attorney. Well, who licensed you? Well, I believe I'm 001 at this point. John Doe Smith, am I the first one you've ever given power of attorney to represent you? Yes, as a matter of fact, there you are, Judge. I was licensed by the licensor as a licensee to represent John Doe Smith, and it came from the horse's mouth. What more do you need? Well, you're not licensed by the Supreme Court. Well, who licensed the licensor? to be a licensee? And how did they get that power? And do you see how the ball of worms just starts to come out?
How you like
you
his
start to ask
ball?
questions.
How you like his tar ball? His tar
They
ball.
are screwed.
I love it. I love it. But now, if you get a really nasty bunch of court officers, the first thing the prosecutor is going to turn around is
you're fired. It's that simple. You're fired.
Practicing law and license, and that's happened. I've seen cases where that's happened to private prosecutors or to people who are representing someone who are not attorneys.
So then it comes to this: only a tyrant, only a brute disregards sound doctrines and principles. And to clearly articulate that even better, the
violent take it by force.
Exactly. A brute who is blatant disregard for the law will oftentimes show his tyrannical behavior by way of force. When they can't get you to believe what they need you to believe, which is a lack of knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, then they automatically turn to force. And you want to know how you stop that? Quid pro quo is in order. If you're going to tase, pepper spray, and beat me, then I suggest the man that gave you the order is also tased, pepper sprayed, and beaten.
Yes.
Well, wait a minute. I'm going to redact that from the record because, see, here's the deal. They tried to send me one time to a loony bin, and I would have a blast in a loony bin. I'm just going to tell you that right now. I love people, and the crazier you are, the more fun I have. And so I looked at the judge and I said, he says, well, I think you need 3 days in the mental health facility. And I said, as long as a quid pro quo is in order. He goes, excuse me? I said, you heard me. As long as a quid pro quo is in order and you're coming with me. And because I understand contract law at law, if you understand the contract law, you can bind them with a quid pro quo. But the trick is you have to be savvy. You can't be quiet. You can't be mute. You can't be mute. You have to speak.
Derek, I definitely need to give you power of attorney. I'm emotionally involved. They left my family, my pregnant, soulmate on the side of the road.
No, you don't need to give me power of attorney. What you need to do is submit your 12 presumptions of the law handwritten into the court and get them to respond. When they don't respond, see, I handle everything outside of their venue.
Can you share that? Do you have a breakdown on the 12 presumptions that you share?
I do.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
I would still love you to come down, man, just because I wouldn't want to be the guy holding the camera being told you can't film. That's all.
Can I send this to your email?
Maybe done all video now because they're all closed down over there real quick.
Hold on. Well, and that's the other thing that we're coming into problems with. And this is a reality that needs to be known is that now they're using Zoom, right, to hold court. And they're getting people to admit to being the name. And then they're just muting them out and not allowing them to speak after that. And so
because it's all about the name.
There's 3 trial de novos that are going on right now that I know of based upon that alone. And I'm sure they're going to say, oh, we had technical errors, we had issues. But here's the thing. When you use Zoom and you send documentation, it's recorded. So it's quite the platform. And if they're not going to allow you to speak, then you need to start submitting stuff into the chat that they can't say they didn't have knowledge of. So you can use this 12 presumptions of law. I much prefer to handwrite everything. And here's why. When we look at Joseph Story, Pomeroy, Gibson, and we start to get into the inner workings of what they're saying, a handwritten document supersedes anything that is typed or printed. And the reason for that in law is that only a man can scribe and write. You're leaving your impression, your soul upon the paper. It is undeniable. The state can only print. The state can never write by hand. And that is how you're showing the distinct difference between a man and a corporation. If the state wouldn't mind actually handwriting their bill of particulars, it'd be greatly appreciated. State of Nebraska, Mr. and Mrs. State of Nebraska, if they wouldn't mind handwriting that, it would be greatly appreciated. And I'll wait an eternity to see their response.
Truly been blessed. And blessing us all
just
right
think
now.
about it. I invoke the 6th Amendment without saying I'm invoking the 6th Amendment. All right. I'm not challenging jurisdiction by saying I'm challenging jurisdiction. I'm just challenging jurisdiction by the way I move. That's it. Ain't nothing special about it. Now you can go in there like a wingnut. I'm challenging jurisdiction because I know you don't have any. Well, he who makes the claim has the burden of proof. Good luck proving the negative. You can't prove the negative. And that's where they got everybody. So what you do is you simply put the onus of probandi back on them. How did you get jurisdiction? When did you get it? Why do you have it? Who gave it to you? How did they get it? You see what I'm saying? You could spend
like
a
child,
day,
like a child asking questions. Yeah, like that.
Oh, and they hate it because they cannot overcome it. See, it's not enough for him to just say, I have jurisdiction. It must be proven on and for the record, which means I must consent to it, which means you have to have the facts and evidence that you rely upon to make this presumption. Otherwise, I rebuke this presumption that you have jurisdiction. We can't possibly move forward. In the legal sense, we're looking at an estoppel. In the lawful sense and equity, we're looking at an injunction.
Boom.
What jurisdiction do you want to play in? The commercial, military, admiralty law? Sure, then bring the international contract that I'm in breach of, because this is a civil matter at this point, and you're alleging that somehow I'm obligated to follow your statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations all at the same time, not getting paid for it. I don't mind abiding by your statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, and regulations, but damn it, I am not going to be a willing participant of involuntary servitude. You can kiss my ass and pay me.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. We
pay me.
We fully
or we can go
this.
to the exclusive jurisdiction of equity where everybody's rights are protected, and the state of Nebraska has no rights because they're insolvent. They have no sovereignty. They're a corporation. Get out of here with that nonsense. That means that everything that is created rightfully belongs back to the source, which is I, the living man. The energy is the gold, ladies and gentlemen. The energy is your gold. The life source energy is what moves the machine, and without us, they fail. It doesn't say go out there and have wanton disregard for your fellow man's life by drinking and driving. I think it's absolutely stupid to drink and drive. But at the same time, if you have had a few cocktails and you are on your way home and you have harmed nobody and you get accosted against your will, are we basing the fact that law is built on probabilities? Because if that's the case, we're all guilty. Nobody leave your bed tomorrow morning because somebody might accidentally kill somebody. And in the name of safety, we shall all stay home and in bed tomorrow. How does that make any sense?
I do see the catch-22 there. I mean, and it really is a catch-22.
So, but here we go. Legally, it's a wanton disregard for another man's life. And you get busted 2, 3, 4 times for DUI. But he might go 100 years in his life and never have an accident. So are we thought policing now? Are we putting people in prison, which are for-profit corporations at this point, for debt notes and credits on account and securities and bonds and dividends and derivatives, hediments, general tangibles, intangibles? Okay. When you understand the monetary system and really see the insanity that's going on, okay, due to our lack of freaking knowledge.
Yeah,
that's what it boils down to. So I'm not opposed to the 14th Amendment and using that as what did you call it? A 14th Amendment audit. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. There are many ways to skin this cat. I'm just not comfortable invoking their rules, city ordinances, and placating to their system when I operate by the highest system, which is trust.
Right. Now, my mentor, his argument, because he acknowledges exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely.
By doing that, we are basically consenting to jurisdiction. We're consenting to the use of their statutes.
That's right.
He said that in the art of war, Sun Tzu said, take the most direct route to victory.
You bet.
Don't build a new road. Use the roads that your opponent has already built. And he said that when he first started doing this, that he tried to go into these more deep mechanisms like what you're invoking,
right.
But he said that he found it to be much more expeditious and much more difficult for them to argue an attrition by simply using what is in the statutes, because it is there for them to abide.
Right. But the law, again, was not written for a righteous man. And let me tell you this, your heart tells you the difference between right and wrong. So let me get this. A homeless man who can't read a book isn't able to affirm the law? Are we led to believe that if you cannot read, you will never know the law? That it's not, in fact, written on your heart at all?
Well, that's part of the tactic and strategy that the bar uses.
Right. And that's why I use trust law, because it's written on our hearts already. I never knew that my parents in the community I was raised in raised me to be equitable. I never knew that was the name for what they were doing and instilling in me. Equity is beautiful. It's right or it's wrong. There is no gray area. In legal land, there's murder 1, murder 2, homicide, negligent homicide, right? But in law, it's just murder. If there was ill will, malice, and intent, it's murder. I don't care how you dice it up, and murder is wrong. See, in legal land, murder is also wrong, but then you have homicide, murder 1, murder 2, right? Justification, if you will.
Well, this is why I think you would be the ideal private prosecutor to go after the court officers and even the jury members.
What I'm talking about is the conflict of variance between the law of equity and the at-law rules.
Well, you know all the cases where we see videos of cops shooting people in cold blood and then walking scot-free, or they even get paid vacation.
And you know what? If I went over to Iraq tomorrow and unloaded on a 14-year-old kid carrying an AK-47, the first question they would ask me before they put me in Leavenworth was, did he engage you? Well, no, he was walking with a gun. It was pointed my direction. I wasn't going to wait until he fired, so I shot. You killed a 14-year-old boy that didn't engage you, and now you're going to prison for the rest of your life for murder because you are a private mercenary. You don't actually work for the United States government. You're not actually a military personnel. You are a private subcontractor who has entered into contract, and you are 100% liable for your actions. They dissolve all liability. That's correct.
Can y'all hear
That's
this?
correct.
Can y'all hear this? Listen.
Yeah.
Listen.
So now cops.
Can you hear?
Same
can
thing.
You hear this? Can you hear what's going on?
Cops.
No,
cops.
I can't hear something that if you're playing
quiet
something, we can't hear it.
Quiet for a minute.
I'm not hearing anything.
Okay, I got a
you can't hear me?
military chopper right over me.
Anyway, the police force is the same thing. They're private mercenary contractors for a principal acting as trustee to bolster the profits or the lack thereof, because they're just creating securities, negotiable instruments that are being monetized. And then, of course, they're not reporting it to the IRS because they're futures. It's not money yet. Okay. It's not credits on account yet until they put the mechanism into place. And that's why they're hiding all this. The judiciary, if you will, is a $10 trillion a year credit on account generator, and nobody talks about it. Forbes top 500 business is really the judiciary, and nobody talks about it.
That's a fact.
They're the reaper of the souls, the harvester of the energy, and they're creating these negotiable instruments in a false and fictitious monetary system that will never go away, by the way. I don't ever see it going away, but it will metamorph. It will change into something very sinister very shortly when they look to move to go exclusive digital, which is pretty much where we are now, but there's still 1/8 of the U.S. Federal Reserve notes are still in currency, physically tangible, right? So that allows for a free market that isn't really controlled by government, if you will, which is really a corporation. See, the government, the alleged government, would lead you to believe that marijuana is horrible, yet, and in fact needed to be made illegal, when in truth the pharmaceutical companies, through lobbyists, line the pockets of politicians, they came up with some blasphemous reason for it to be made illegal, which was it made black men want to rape white women, which is just an atrocity in itself.
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
Slanderous to a degree that
that was the second insane. That was the second drug they needed.
But hold on.
It was cocaine.
They made it illegal because they had figured out a way to chemically alter it and make it their own. And now they wanted to sell their product for profit and deny God, through God, his remedies that he's already provided. There's a reason that doctors can't use the word cure. They're forbidden from using the word cure because that's not what they're in the business of. They're in the business of generating profits. All right. How many doctors actually know what's in the pill that they're prescribing you? Very, very, very few of them. They all talk to pharmacists. And the pharmacists are the ones that say, well, chemically, the guy's blood and everything, his enzymes will digest this just fine. Chemically, they're making the connection between the man's body and the pharmaceutical pill, right? Which is a chemically laden product designed to alter God's grand design. Everything you need in this life is here and on the planet already. And the lobbyists and the government are making it illegal for profit. Let's just be honest. There would be no need for 66 million statutes, codes, city ordinances, rules, regulations, and provisions if for nothing else than to generate profit by people's ignorance. You see, because 99.9% of people out there are good by nature. And to prove that, we don't have an officer walking with little Susan, little Tommy, little Johnny every day because they're good by nature. There's not enough cops out there to do that anyway. So it's just a racketeering scheme.
Yeah.
It's a RICO scheme when you see through it all. But
there you go.
I'll yield the floor.
Well,
Leon.
so the next question is what is the next step? And and what my mentor taught me was that you have to have some kind of door kicker. If you're going to go after these big picture issues, you've got to have a door kicker. And I think using Ken and mine and the gentleman in Virginia and Mr. Timms, and there's another case that was heard in the Supreme Court. I think it was out of Seattle, where they're doing exactly that.
Hold on, let me interrupt. I want to use Derek's case because I want to know why I'm being treated differently.
Well, here's the thing: we have immediate unmet needs, uh, of victims of crime, and the catalyst, the stimulus for these crimes were committed by agents for the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and the bar associations, and they're being carried out by agents for the Blue Wall of Silence. And there was an extensive investigation. I want to say it was done in New York and Chicago, and I want to say it was done in the 70s, where federal investigators actually established the fact that a private criminal organization occupies law enforcement seats. And, every single law enforcement officer has taken that oath. Now, we can get into discussions about oaths and all that, but I don't want to do that. They have a duty to act, and there's certain things they can and cannot do. And when they act outside of their mandates from the statutes, well, they act in their personal capacity. An officer does not have jurisdiction merely because he deems it so, and he does so at his own peril. And with that being said, and our understanding of what agent and agency is, well, now it's time for us to follow that chain of unlawful command and go right up it, and and call them out. And the thing about the bar associations and the Democrats and Republicans, who I will just refer to as the authoritarian party from this point forth, the authoritarian party, with the bar association, they abrogated the citizens' right to privately prosecute in the courts. And that is an ancient power and right. I've actually got that from the court's mouth. So, and that's why it still exists in Texas. And Texas is the last state where you can go right directly to the grand jury and request indictments. Idaho is the next best state. You have to go before a magistrate prior, so that the magistrate can assess, well, is there in fact evidence that a crime has been committed?
Yeah, but a grand jury of what? A grand jury of who?
Of our peers.
That's going to be a tough one, ain't it, Derek?
Yeah, and I know.
And the reason that it's tough is because of the dogma that is believed amongst society. I once had a judge tell me one time, in society, when one man speaks, the other man yields the floor. And I looked at her and I said, I agree with that. I'll enter into that contract and we'll be both bound by that. 5 minutes later, she interrupts me and I said, didn't you just say in society it's typically common that when one man speaks, the other one yields the floor, and we both agreed to that contract? Now you're in breach of contract, which is in fact, what do they like to hammer us for? They like to hammer us for contempt of court. And I said, well, that is contempt of court. Well, she knew that I could prove contempt of court because we entered into a verbal contract, and to breach that contract is in fact contempt because we had a court going, right? Her and I had an agreement, an accord, playing a game, and there were rules to that game that were established, and she agreed, and she's in breach. So once you learn the game, it's so easy to stand as a man and just put your boot up their ass. It's not hard, but it takes a lot of balls, a lot of bravado to stand up. The enforcement comes through you. If I ask you, is it Bian? Is that how you say your name?
What now? Blaine.
No, he's just citizen
Blaine.
man.
Blaine, if I ask you this, what's the highest
Blaine
court?
Samaritano means good Samaritan in
This
Spanish.
ain't Zan, man. That Zan John was who we were on.
No. That's cool. I just wanted to be able to identify him because I wanted to speak directly to him.
Citizen X is who he wants to be.
Buan, okay. What is the highest court in the land, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, you just schooled me on the fact that it is me.
There you go. Yep. You are the highest court.
Yes. Every individual judges. So I would agree with that.
Now, do you understand why?
Well, because the law or good morals originate from the man.
Right. And no agent and agency can testify with firsthand knowledge of anything of fact, substance, and material fact, right?
Because they are fictitious.
Right. They are manufacturing crimes. And when I say manufacturing, it tells you exactly what they're involved in. Commerce, commercial. They're manufacturing.
Right.
They're presuming and assuming that you belong to their society. So I look at this judge and I said, well, that's funny because your society and my society are two different societies. And I know this to be true because your society practices the undoing of God's law and my society practices upholding law. Excuse me, I didn't use the word practicing. And I said, my society believes in upholding the law. The law has already been firmly established.
Right.
It's written in the good book. The 10 commandments are all you need. And the real one is do no harm. Love yourself as you love thy neighbor. And the problem with this society that I see now is everybody's forgotten how to love themselves. They're so gluttonous. They fall part of the 7 deadly sins. Look at the women that take 5,000 photos of themselves a day. How vain. Yeah. How vain can you be?
That? Yeah.
So, but continue on because I'm learning just as much from you as I'm sure you're learning from me. And this is how we do it, ladies.
I cannot claim to be the author of the strategy. This was taught to me. I am just repeating it back. Now, in my several years of reading law, I have, found things that I have added into it. Coining the term 14th Amendment audit, I coined that term. Nobody told me that word. So basically the deal is that, the strategy in a nutshell is that you go to report a crime. You bait an official to violate their qualified immunity. You report that crime to the next higher authority having jurisdiction until you get to the grand jury. Okay. Now, we learned this. This was first used during and shortly after the Civil War, because after the truce was called, we still had thousands of KKK members and Confederates and white supremacists and slavers holding public offices, all the way from your beat cop